Hi, it's
All
Sharon
right.
Henderson here from the KEM WordPress Community, and it's wonderful to have you here. And I am super excited that we have got a very, very knowledgeable guest speaker with us. We have Joshua Jarvis, who is the owner of Yak Local, which is a full-service digital agency that specializes in search engine optimization, AdWords, and social media, which are just the most awesome ways to grow your business. So I will stop talking in a moment, and I'm going to let Joshua introduce himself. He is the SEO expert, so I'm going to hand over to him now. Thanks for joining us, Joshua.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. It's great to be here on another Facebook Live. And yeah, I'm super excited to just have some time to discuss SEO with Sharon, and hopefully everybody that's listening or listens to the replay, can glean some interesting information. People refer to me as an SEO expert, and, sometimes I like to deflect a little bit and just tell them that I just love SEO and I love to research it, and I love implementing new strategies and just seeing, how it affects rankings. And SEO is a cert, which as a definition, let's go ahead and define it. SEO, the abbreviation for search engine optimization. And it is all about optimizing your website for search engines. So that's what it's all about. And that's really been the core of what I've done for the past several years, and really focused on, defining and honing my strategy to help clients and people I just talk to on a daily basis and kind of mentor just about, what does it look like to have a really solid SEO strategy for whatever they're trying to accomplish. And it's really interesting because SEO is used in a lot of different capacities. There's a lot of different reasons you might want to rank your website, right, in Google for different things. Maybe you're selling a product or a service. Maybe you have a local business, maybe it's an online business. There's so many different things, and that's what makes it really fascinating.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that, especially for people building websites, they may not really think about it. And it's interesting because I had a chat with a guy from whose focus is predominantly click funnels, so building funnels. Even the website is funnel based, and it's interesting because SEO really is it's an afterthought for a lot of platform users. That's why WordPress is fantastic, because it does enable you to optimize for SEO, and you get points right off the bat for using it. And I would be interested to know what your thoughts are on the reach for SEO with other platforms.
Yeah.
And Wix and the like. That would be just very interesting, I think, for our viewers, given that WordPress is the starting point for so many of us.
Sure. Yeah, and it's interesting because thanks for the question, because I think it's really a question I get a lot. People come to me with their website and they ask, hey, we want to do some SEO. We want to get more visibility in search, and that's one of the first questions I ask is, okay, what platform is your website on? What's the state of your website? And there's varying answers. There's a lot of great platforms out there that make it very quick to build a website, right? You have Wix, and you have Squarespace and Shopify, and all these that probably have the most publicity. You see the YouTube ads all the time. You see the occasional TV commercial for some of these platforms, and I think that's why they're really widely known. But it's all about understanding, is your website a good candidate for SEO? I think that's a really important question to ask. And that's the question that I ask, So the leading question to that is, what platform are you on? And a lot of times I will get, hey, we're on Wix or we're on Shopify and whatnot. And you can go through the process of optimizing those websites for SEO, right?
Yeah.
You can take those steps, right, and optimize the best you can. There are limitations, right? There are limitations in what you can control. And that's the limiting factor with a lot of these platforms that may make it really easy to kind of drag and drop a website real quickly together, and hit publish, right? Say in a couple of hours. but you lose a lot of the control over being able to optimize the subtle things that are really the core of ranking factors in your search engine optimization, right?
Mhm.
So I don't always say, oh, well, we immediately have to go to WordPress, but I would say almost 95% of the time, if they're on Squarespace or Wix and they really want to implement an effective SEO strategy,
Mhm.
that will be my response. I will be like, okay, let's look at the potential of moving over to WordPress, because you're going to get so much more control, so much more flexibility to handle all the details that we need to handle,
Yeah.
to really optimize for your search engines.
Yeah. Are you able to just give our viewers a little bit of detail there as to what the subtleties are so that they can visualize it?
Sure. Yeah. One of the simplest things to talk about in terms of subtleties, right? Subtle differences is, say, with WordPress, you get so much more control over even the URL structure, right? Versus, say, Squarespace. I was trying to remember, we were auditing a site this past week. I believe it was Squarespace. And there was a huge issue because it removed all the dashes from the URLs and things like that. And I may have gotten that wrong. I can't remember if it was Squarespace or another one. It was one of those, popular builders, and there was no control, right, over the URLs. With WordPress, you have 100% of that control, in terms of your link structure, whether or not you want to do a hierarchy of links, you want to do kind of a silo structure. So there's so many different things that you can do with WordPress, and it's so much more control also over your redirects, your 301 redirects that you implement in your site. If you can imagine it, you can do it with WordPress, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
With these other platforms, there's a set limit of things that you can change, right? And recently, platforms like Wix came out and said, we're launching new abilities to control your SEO. And they did release new things, right? And they gave you more control. But if you want to be really competitive and you want to compete with your competitors, if your competitors have more control over their site, right, and can implement the extra mile, and you
Absolutely.
can't, then you're going to have a hard time competing. So URL structure is one of those subtle differences. There's a lot more, even like implementing schema markup and things like that. Schema markup is kind of it's been around, but it is kind of more of a buzzword now than it ever has been. And even implementing that is so much simpler in WordPress than some of these other platforms where you may not even be able to implement it.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. One thing that a couple of questions that just pop in my mind. The first one is, with WordPress, there are plugins you can install that enable you to connect or link up different pages so that it helps the bots really index your site and work out, how the structure works, and that does give you juice for SEO. I'm not sure whether that's available on other platforms. Are you aware of that? Whether you can come in that way?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to like internal linking between pages and things like that. Yeah. So internal linking is, kind of an aspect of SEO strategy that's really, really important. And it's often a very strategic strategy. That is one that WordPress gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, you can technically do that in some of the other builders, just because, as long as you can put in, an anchor link, right? And you can point that at one of your other pages. You can create those internal links within your page. But again, there's a lot more flexibility in doing that, right, with WordPress. I also believe that with WordPress, you get so much more control over your sitemap. You get so much more control over your robots.txt file. And you can control so much more. Now, with that extra control, it comes extra responsibility, right? And so that's why I think this is good that we're even talking about this, because, just some things to get, in the back of your mind about, as maybe you're building your site, or maybe you're revamping your website and you're on WordPress, and thinking about the subtle things, or maybe this prompts you to do a little bit more research and the way you're restructuring, is it a good platform, or is it a good foundation for SEO and kind of how you're restructuring or building your site?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was talking about the internal links, and you were saying how you can anchor, I'm actually thinking about a plugin. I think it's called Interlink, and it enables you to actually link different keywords and have people move through from those alone. It's interesting because I set this up on my husband's website, running on facts. And he added his keyword. He ranked on the first page of Google, and he's not written that many articles. But what we've done really strategically with SEO. So it's fascinating that you can do that with a topic that is just written about so much. But by being strategic with the keywords, we had him on the first page of Google for those keywords without spending any money on advertising or anything else. And I think that's a big thing that people forget these days, especially because I'm quite active in the ClickFunnels groups, and I see it a lot. It's about get your funnel out there, plug it into, hook it up to some Facebook advertising, boom, you're away. And yet there's all these organic strategies that will stand you in far better stead in the long term and cost you nothing to implement. So to me, it really is a no-brainer not to implement SEO. Before I ask you the next question, I've got somebody who asked me some questions, so they don't feel neglected.
Sure.
Hi, Jeff Shaffert. Thank you for tuning in. We have a couple of questions here from Jeff. Firstly, I've used Dreamweaver in the past, but it seems WordPress has a lot more plugins and is easier to implement. So, Joshua, any comments on that?
Yeah, and even from an SEO perspective, look, I mean, Dreamweaver probably gives you the ultimate level of control because you even have access to every bit of code, right? Because it's generating HTML, it's generating everything. On the other hand, because way back in the day, it's been a long time since I've used Dreamweaver. It really has been. But I remember, I really think I used Dreamweaver when it first came out. And I was like, wow, this is a really neat tool, right? But WordPress gives you so much more flexibility, and it gives you so much more. It gives you the same amount of control that you have with the raw HTML that Dreamweaver spits out, yet it's much more organized and it's easier to maintain, right? Because one of the troubles that we had with one client site that was built on Dreamweaver is anytime they wanted to do an update, right? Or say they wanted to make an update across 15 pages, but yet it was just the same thing, right? The same update. Say they wanted to add, you're having to do that to every page, right? And it's a very complex process. And WordPress is all about modules and blocks, right? And reusing blocks as much as possible. So it just has so many advantages. I would love to have a conversation with someone that actively uses Dreamweaver, and hear a little bit more about it and see maybe what their opinion in terms of, where they think the advantages of Dreamweaver would be. I mean, because I'm a little open-minded to it just because I haven't touched it in probably 10 years, 12 years. It's been a long time. So
the only person I know that used it probably hasn't used it for about the same amount of time, because with the introduction of page builders, it makes no sense to do it the hard way when you can do it the easy way. And at the end of the day, prices for websites have come down because they're becoming increasingly easier to create. So even from an hourly rate perspective or the project cost perspective, it just makes no financial sense to me to do that. So I don't know of anyone that uses it, to be perfectly honest with you, in this day and age. I know a few people who do like to code from scratch, and I take my hat off to them.
Well, and that's
financially, I don't see how that can happen. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I didn't cover this in the beginning, but I come from a software development background. I was a software engineer for a long time. I built, web development applications. One second. Plug my computer in here. I was a web developer, from the ground up. I code in a lot of JavaScript, know a lot of JavaScript libraries and frameworks. And so, there's that aspect of it is kind of fun to code from the ground up, with frameworks like Bootstrap and whatnot. but it's all about becoming more efficient without losing the quality and control that you get, right? I think it's about finding that balance. For me, I've found that balance with WordPress, and so I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you can code to your heart's content if you want to with WordPress.
Sure.
Obviously not from the ground up, but there's so much scope for that. Yeah, so I think we're preaching to the converted, you and I. Now, Jeff also asks, is there a cost for the plugins? And let's see, but it seems WordPress has a lot more plugins. Okay, so the original question Jeff asked was, I've used Dreamweaver in the past, but it seems WordPress has a lot more plugins and is easier to implement. And then he's asked after, is there a cost for the plugins? Which I think I can probably answer that one for you, Jeff. There's basically a WordPress repository for plugins that you can access from your admin dashboard, or you can Google them as well. The ones in the repository are the most up-to-date versions. So you go in there and they're all open source, or at least they are the free or freemium versions of the plugins. So you can try them. And then if you find that you need to extend functionality, then they usually do have premium functionality that you obviously pay for. So you can normally try before you buy. There are just so many plugins for everything. But my one word of caution would be, don't be like I was in the very, very beginning, like a child in a candy shop wanting to buy and eat everything, because you need to be strategic about the ones that you choose, or you're going to end up with a bloated site that functions poorly, and the more external code that you insert into your website, the more risk of conflicts happening. So just a word to the wise, but yes, there's a plugin for everything, and if there isn't one, then somebody will develop one because they'll see that there's a gap in the market. So, Josh, is there anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that sometimes I think the kid in the candy store syndrome, because you see a lot of shiny new like WordPress plugins, maybe they're free, you can try out. What I do is I'll take my site and I will copy my site over, right, to a development environment, make a copy of my site that's not live, but it's one I can work with, and try out some new plugins and just play around with it, and just have fun with it. But don't do it on your live site, so even if it slows your site down, it's not that big of a deal. You can go back and remove them. So
yeah, absolutely. And just adding to that, a lot of hosts these days enable you to create a staging site with one click. So it's like a duplicate of your site, and you can make your changes and then push them through to the live site if you're happy with them. So that's the safest way to do it if your host allows for that. Or
exactly.
you can just clone them, and then I guess there's an extra step there because you've got to replicate the work. You can't just push it through. But yeah, good point.
So yeah, I want to touch back on one thing right before we got to that question. And if there's another question, go ahead with that one. But, you mentioned ClickFunnels and traffic, it's a real common thing. And, I think there's two different ecosystems. There's one where you throw up a site and you're, it's all about converting the user on the site, right? And then you're just relying on paid traffic. You're relying on Facebook traffic. You're relying on AdWords or whatever kind of traffic you're using, right? And then there's a whole nother ecosystem of building a site and then relying on organic traffic, right? And it just depends on your strategy, what you want to really leverage, which channels of traffic. And for me, I have friends that they love the paid stuff, and we do a lot of paid stuff for clients in terms of paid advertising, like Facebook ads and Google AdWords. But SEO is the most fascinating because, in a sense, you're not paying for the traffic. You might pay in time and effort and money to invest in your SEO strategy, but the traffic itself, right, it is free in a sense. And it's amazing the volume of traffic that you can drive to your site. I have a local real estate client, and they get about 3,000 to 6,000 visits a month, in traffic to their website, and it's all organic. And it's really amazing just to watch that happen.
And how do you do that? What's the magic? Can you give away the secrets?
Sure, I'll say this. The key is keyword research, right? And I would say that before you begin to develop a strategy for what you're trying to accomplish with SEO, search engine optimization, you need to put in some keyword research, right? Or maybe find a buddy, find a friend, or find someone that can do some keyword research with you that has a little knowledge of the area. Because the key is you have to determine, all right, just like any other advertising channel, right? Even with search and organic search, you have to determine who is my target audience.
Yeah.
And in determining your target audience, you have to determine what search terms are they using to find the answers or find the content and the information, product or service that they're trying to find. And those keywords are the ones that you're going to build your strategy around. And so that is really step number one. And that ties right back to the real estate client that I mentioned, right? It was identifying their specific audience that was going to be the user that the content on their website catered to. And we wanted to make sure that we captured that type of traffic, because then, as we continue to publish new content, right, is for people that were looking for realtors and needed information about buying their house and marketing their house and selling and things like that, we began to get a larger and larger pool of that search traffic. For them, it was getting about 47 different search terms in the top 3 spots, right, in organic results. Across each of these search terms would get between 400 and 800 searches per month, and so it all adds up. It adds up. You may have a few keywords that get 100 or 200 searches a month, but you get 30 or 40 of those type of keywords, and then you've got 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 visitors per month to your website. So,
and so when you mention the keyword research, would that be, for example, looking at competitors and what search terms keyword terms they are featuring for? Is that how you do it, or is it more Google searches? How do you go about determining the best keywords?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways, right? You mentioned one, competitor research, and there's a lot of great tools out there that you can plug in, say your competitors that are on the first page of Google, and you can see which keywords they rank for. You can see approximate volumes. You can see the approximate amount of traffic they get based on their position and their volume and things like that. But you could plug in a site and see that, they're ranking for 1,700 keywords, right? And that gives you a whole list of keywords to begin your research on. And then you can start ordering and filtering by, number one, how much volume does each keyword get that they're ranking for? Number two, how difficult, because there's a lot of tools out there that can help you understand, or at least give you a little bit of information about how difficult would it be to rank for that keyword. And I think that's a really neat metric that Google's not giving us that metric. That's kind of that's the tool's job to kind of break down how difficult is this keyword based on the competitors that are ranking for it.
I have mentioned in the group before a tool that I use, which is Keywords Everywhere, which is it's a Chrome extension that's quite handy. Have you ever used that one, Joshua, or are you using something that's a little bit more sophisticated?
I use a lot of different tools, but you know what? That's one that I have installed in Chrome and I leave on all the time. And so it's always there, even when I'm just using it. I wonder if I share my screen, if everything will be fine. Do you think I can? Let's just try it.
You'll need to choose a different browser page or tab. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to get this really cool kind of mirror.
Perfect.
Effect.
I'll choose. So I have Chrome open. I have a Chrome tab open with a random plumbing typed in, right? And I just wanted to show the keywords everywhere because I think it's a great example. Share this tab, and maybe we can see it.
I'll add that to the screen. There we go. Now I might just move us out altogether, shall I? Okay. And then we can just take a closer look at it. Okay.
So this is just a good example. Like I just plugged in plumbing, right? Yep. And the reason I wanted to point this out is because there's some numbers that are kind of interesting, right? Like this one says 550,000 searches per month, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that I was kind of searching in my particular area And so we know that this is not necessarily accurate for my local area, right? That's kind of like just nationally, or maybe, yeah, it would just be a national number. But if you look over here, it gives me these boxes. It gives me this box, and it gives me this box. It gives me all these suggestions based on what I typed in, right? And it's this little Chrome plugin right here. It's called Keywords Everywhere, like you mentioned. And if you install as a Chrome extension and you just turn it on, anytime you do a search, we get all of these things over here. A great example is laser engraving machine. We'll just pull that up. And so it just gives us a lot of information, you know, about how many times, which that's huge, you know, 27,000 searches per month for a laser engraving machine. If you were to advertise on AdWords, it would cost you about $3.24 per click. You know, so it gives you a little bit of information there. It also gives you competition, which is on a scale of 0 to 1, 1 being the most difficult. And so this is a very difficult keyword to rank for. So that's a great tool. It is a great tool.
It is. And so I've never done it that way. I've always right-clicked on my mouse. I might just bring us back in. Let's have a look. So I've always right-clicked with my mouse to get it to work. I've never actually typed in a keyword. So when you type in the keyword, you just click on your tool, do you, on the Keywords Everywhere, and then it tells you everything about that keyword as soon as it sees it on the page. Is that how it works?
Yep. So you basically, as long as it's turned on, which I leave mine on all the time, and then you just search as a word in Google, and when you hit enter, it's basically adding all those metrics, you know, at the top, and it adds those 2 boxes on the right, gives you all those suggested keywords that are similar, and it tells you next to each keyword about the approximate volume, traffic volume per month for each of those keywords. So
it's great tool. Yeah, it is a great tool. It's just maybe it's me, but I found it just a little different. Not that user friendly in terms of when sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. So I will have to have another play with that and see if I can get it working the way you just demonstrated. So thanks for that, Joshua. Now I have a couple of questions here. Amanda Tento has just joined us. So hi, Amanda's going to be doing a live with me in the next few weeks. So that's also exciting. And she has asked, I use Keywords Everywhere every day, and she loves it too because she works in SEO. So interesting. So we've all kind of happened upon that tool. It's a very cool one. Jeff has also asked, so it's assumed to say that organic traffic is mostly a key of using the proper SEO versus paid traffic. Yes, so I think what Jeff's asking is the distinction between organic and paid traffic. And organic is basically what you don't pay for, but you work to generate through SEO strategy. But Joshua, I'll let you comment more on that.
Yeah, and if I can, I'm going to share my screen one more time because I think that, you know, to kick off also kind of what we're talking about, let me share this tab real quick one more time.
Sure.
Because
I'll add it to the screen.
Okay, 1 second, share. Okay, I'm sharing now.
Okay, I'll add it in. And we'll just full screen so we can all see a little better. Okay.
Great. So I think it's important. This may have to do with that question you just read off. I think it's important to understand just the layout of the search engine results, right? And everything that's here on the page. Because up at the top, right, the first thing that we get are all the ads, right? And I think everybody understands that these are ads, you know, typically because it says ad here. And you usually get 3 or 4. If there's ads, you know, you typically get 3 or 4. Sometimes you'll have 1. You know, sometimes you might not have any ads. But these are basically all Google AdWords. And then down here you have some YouTube results. See, there's some YouTube results. And then down here, you start getting the organic results, right? These are Amazon.com. Here's a website that talks about laser engravers. Here's a brand. So this is a brand website, Epilogue Laser. And then you get this little interesting snippet. This snippet people always ask. And this is, I forget when they introduced this into the search engine result pages, but this is really interesting because here they kind of grouped questions that people ask, but then the answers are actually coming from organic results. So this is part of the organic results, you know, based on people's search engine optimization efforts. And you can actually implement some very strategic and a little bit more advanced techniques to get your website ranked in these people always ask snippets. And it's actually a really good way to drive traffic to your site, because these get a lot of engagement, because it's very, you know, it's question and answer based, and people love questions and answers, and they typically go and they click on these sites quite often.
So would you be writing posts for blogs that feature those questions, or are we talking long tail keywords here? What do you mean specifically as a way to do that?
The best way to do it is look at your industry, right, that you might be working in terms of an SEO strategy. Look at the types of questions that are showing up here and the people always ask. And if it's the type of questions and answers that work for, say, an article, right, write an article, but look at what's currently ranking, right, for these questions. Because what it will do, it'll help you understand, and I'm not going to open it up right now, but if you had gone to this website, right, and you start to break down and ask yourself, okay, why are they using this website in this particular snippet of content to answer this question? Every industry is a little different. You know, you see this a lot for products. You see this a lot for things that people ask a lot of questions about. And so it's really, the best strategy is to go in and evaluate your competition here and see, all right, how is this article catering to answering this question? And you essentially do want to write an article that helps answer that question. And some of it is trial and error to get yourself ranked in these snippets here. And it's some advanced technique for sure. But a good place to start is evaluating these sites that are ranking in these snippets, and that'll help you understand.
And equally, because content is also king. So if you're looking for ideas of what to write about, you can be strategic about it by looking at the sorts of articles. Obviously, plagiarism is not cool, and you'll get pinged for it.
Right.
But you can certainly reframe the content. You can even share it potentially, and that gives you link juice as well. So there's lots that you can do, and it just, because blogs can be hard to fill, and you've just given the absolutely perfect strategy to use to fill them. So I see that as a real plus, as well as obviously the SEO strategic aspect. So thank you for that. That's
for sure.
Pretty interesting stuff, and not something I'd really thought about. I've seen it, but it had never really resonated with me that they are doing something that's actually so powerful in terms of what you can use it for.
Well, and then I'll also say there's so many different things that they continue to add in the search result page, right? I just showed you YouTube videos, as people always people also ask questions, snippets. Sometimes you'll also get, for local searches, you'll get the famous map pack, right, that shows 3 businesses along with their reviews. So there's it's come a long way from what it used to be, where it was basically ads and organic rankings, right? And now it's full of so much to get people's attention and pull people's attention away from organic. So you have to look in how to take advantage of all these new things. You know, nowadays we're even using SEO to rank YouTube videos, because those are being prominently shown in the search engine results there. And so ranking videos is really important.
Yeah, well, and I think anyway, the video content is really powerful, and it does have a lot of SEO juice. So again, because I'm always thinking from a content perspective as well, because SEO is awesome, but you also need the content to make that work. So obviously they go very much hand in hand. But I think it's great for our viewers when they're thinking, okay, what content am I going to create, to be a little bit more strategic about it. And thank you, Joshua, for these tools and tips, because I think that will be incredibly helpful. I think we've covered all the questions so far. but nobody is commenting #KEM, which you need to do to go in the draw for Joshua's super awesome giveaway. So do you want to tell us a wee bit about the giveaway?
Yeah, for sure. When I sent it to Sharon, I had labeled it as 5 steps to guarantee your website is a good candidate for SEO. And we talked about that at the very beginning, just about making sure your website is a good candidate for SEO. And I've been working on rewriting this over the past few weeks, and just finished it up and put the final touches on it so it'll be ready to send out, So like Sharon said, hashtag. And so we can get that out to you guys. I think it's going to be really great because it's all about taking steps. That's with a lot of things, whether you're building a website, whether you're starting SEO strategy, and it's about taking the right steps. And this is what I kind of wrote is really the 5 best first steps to take to make sure you're setting yourself up for success and making sure your website is a good candidate for SEO. So kind of 5 steps you can follow, you kind of have those in front of you, and it would kind of be your guiding light, to kind of start your journey if you're going to try and do it on your own and kind of go through the process of learning.
Yeah, that's really cool. So far we have Fiona is the guaranteed winner of the giveaway. Unless
Right.
more comments, so we'll see what happens. Okay, so what else can we talk about? So we've talked about the first step business owners can take. Do you want to add any more to that, or should we move on to the second step?
Yeah, let me kind of summarize just a little bit, because I think what we did is we talked a little bit about the first step, right? Which is making sure your website is a good candidate for SEO. We also kind of bounced around talking about some of the necessary concepts in terms of a little bit of keyword research, understanding, keyword research is a part of your strategy of what you're going to be doing for SEO. We've talked a little bit just about the core, like what is SEO, like looking at the search engine result page and seeing all the elements that are there and what you can take advantage of. But kind of in summary, step 1 is all about making sure your website is a good candidate for SEO, right? We talked a little bit about platforms. We talked a little bit about how WordPress can be really your best foot forward in terms of, I will also say this, I say that as well. You can also build things from the ground up, right? You could put a lot of effort into building. I mean, we're doing a project right now for a very large web application, and it is from the ground up. It's not with WordPress just because it's a little out of the scope of WordPress. But I would say for 90, 95, maybe 98% of projects, WordPress is the way to go, and it gives you that flexibility, So the key is making sure your website is a good candidate, making sure it's structured. We talked a little bit about don't overload it with plugins, right? Site speed is important. Site speed is a factor in how your site ranks in SEO. So the amount of plugins you have, the type of hosting you use, all those things play into it. And I'm sure that, and I was even going to talk to Sharon about this probably afterwards, I hope that she does one on just her recommendations for hosting one day. Because I think I've been through every hosting platform in the world, I feel like. So it's a very open-ended topic. So hopefully
really and there's a lot of heat around it too.
Sure.
I actually have done a live on hosting.
Okay.
And it went on a long time. There were a lot of questions because I don't think there is such a thing yet of the perfect host.
Sure.
Either they're I think one of the best ones I've heard, I haven't used them myself, but WP Engine I've heard are really good.
Yeah.
But they're also incredibly expensive.
We have several websites for some really large companies that are on WP Engine, and it works really well. They are very great. They're really great. I use SiteGround a lot. I also use Google Cloud Platform and use some virtual machines to host WordPress. So we use a lot of different stuff. It just,
and I think that's the panacea, most definitely. But I guess for most people who just have the one site or a few sites, it can be challenging to balance the cost. If you're working on large projects, then sure, you would probably want your own server. So with SiteGround, you're on the cloud-based technology, are you, or the shared hosting? Because their GoGeek plan's terrible.
Yeah. So I use pretty much everything that SiteGround has to offer. Here's the problem is like we tried it out for a little while and we put about 15 sites on SiteGround, and then we were like, oh, we want to use it more. And so we used their dedicated cloud stuff and their virtual private server. So we use just about everything that they kind of offer. I also have a lot of just kind of like random blogs and throwaway sites that I just have built and just have a lot of content on, and that's on shared hosting as well.
How do you think shared hosting? Because I have two hosts going at the moment. I've got my own server that I do reseller hosting with, and then I've got my GoGeek plan for SiteGround. And I just find the back end is so slow with SiteGround. I don't know if it's because I'm in New Zealand, but it's painful. Uploading images, I find it really painful for their shared hosting. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, I will say that I know I have a GoGeek account on SiteGround as well, and I have probably about 25 sites on that one. And I'm in central United States, and it's actually very fast. The backend is very fast. So I think that's a valid statement that you made. It could be geographically located, just depending on where their data centers are. That could have something to do with it.
But then you get to select where you want to be located. And what I've chosen is close to me. I can't quite remember where it was, but it was close enough. That shouldn't be happening. But the backend, I just have not been impressed with them. And I was quite surprised because when I looked through all the groups, I did a search and found what are people saying about the different hosts, and SiteGround came out as one of the top, along with Flywheel. But then someone got in touch with me and said Flywheel sucks now. I don't know what it is. I loved Cloudways for a while. They have a different system, so everything has to be done through SFTP as opposed to FTP, as opposed to cPanel. And trying to migrate a whole heap of sites from Cloudways to cPanel was horrendous.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks of tearing my hair out to go to SiteGround to find that they were pretty slow. So so now I'm with a company I'm super happy with. I've got one person in the group who's using them and is pretty happy, and that's where I'm setting up all my websites and my challenge, and really enjoying the speed. Definitely enjoying.
That's awesome. That's great.
If anyone's looking for hosting and they're on a shared plan, I would imagine I'll be able to match what you're paying currently, or maybe charge you a little less for so much more, including unlimited emails, Komodo SSL, you get your own cPanel, and you get lightning fast cloud-based hosting. And the thing that really annoys me about SiteGround, I have to say, is that when you first sign up for them, it's a 60% discount.
Yeah, that's true.
And then when you go to renew, it's super expensive. So I think it's very, very expensive for what you get.
That's true. So yeah, I'll have to hear more about that, because sometimes I'm a forget it and leave it. You know, a lot of what we do for clients, it focuses on like the marketing stuff, and sometimes I forget about hosting, and we probably end up paying way too much. So
once it renews, it's shockingly expensive, and their basic cloud-based plan was horrendous. It was something like $80 a month, which is horrendous. When for Cloudways I was paying $11 a month pay as you go servers, which is a fraction. But unfortunately, if the support's not there, massive issues with their varnish, massive issues. So it wasn't the greatest. Now I have some questions. Cliff Thompson, SiteGround is for advanced users is the question. I would say no. I think their support is very, very good. And they're very, very patient with newbies, because I don't know about you, but for me, I learned an awful lot in the early days through pestering my host. So it's a real plus if you have a host that will go just that little bit above and beyond what's strictly within the remits of their hosting. So I would say no, it's not for advanced users. What about you, Joshua?
You know, I think that if you've never been in cPanel, and you've never been in the back end of something like SiteGround, I think it can always be a little intimidating, you know, and you're kind of trying to, you're like, okay, well, how do I just install WordPress, you know? And I think SiteGround has SiteGround cPanel. They have the, I believe it's the Subtleties package, you know, that you can install WordPress from. And so, you know, there's some great videos out there probably. Maybe Sharon will even create a video on just like your first walkthrough of, you know, cPanel, or just, you know, because I think sometimes once you understand where everything is, it's very simple to use.
Yeah. Well, actually, talking about that, the course that I have been creating for a step-by-step 30-day challenge launching a WordPress website, that actually starts with a wee tour around cPanel. So,
oh, great. Yeah, there you go.
It mystifies it a bit for you. But what I like is that once you know your way around cPanel, it's pretty much the same no matter which host you're with. So there may be a few more tools and icons, but generally speaking, once you know your way around it, it's not too hard. And it's not technical. It's just a matter of familiarity, I think.
Sure. And even just so that people can understand that, oh, you can install an SSL certificate, you know, using Let's Encrypt, you know, like I think a lot of people go a long time without even realizing that that's something that they can do. I know I can do that with SiteGround and some of the others, you know, rather than, you know, and so using those things that you have can take advantage of, you know, so I'm sure you cover a lot of that. But.
Yeah. And I think it's important when you are choosing your host that you make sure that SSL isn't extra. Let's Encrypt is the open source version, so you don't pay for that. You can do that for free. With my hosting, you can either use Let's Encrypt or you can have Komodo SSL. What are your thoughts on Komodo, Joshua?
You know, I've used both. We use a lot of Komodo, DigiCert, you know, Let's Encrypt. It depends on the project and what it is, you know, if it's dealing with financial stuff and e-commerce versus it's just a little blog I threw up, you know. So it really depends on you know, what the application is.
Yeah. So would you recommend Komodo over Let's Encrypt if it was something that's taking money with lots of transactions like e-commerce?
That is I could probably sit down with a few friends of mine and have a heated discussion over that, just in terms of security and like, you know, the differences and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I think I could probably safely say that there's a level of advantage you get with the Komodo certificates, you know, for e-commerce and secure transactions that you get over the Let's Encrypt. I'll say that and probably leave it at that.
just to remind people, with my hosting, you get the Komodo. So
that's great.
Something to be aware of. Another question from Cliff Thompson. I used it once, found it difficult to set up. Just make sure, Cliff, that you take advantage of the free support, because that's what it's there for. And SiteGround are pretty good at helping out. And if you get somebody who's not helpful, just hang up and try again. And the next person, I'm sure, will be super helpful. So it's worth persevering, definitely. Cliff has then said, awesome, good stuff and info. Thank you. You're most welcome. And then Jeff Shafford has asked, so Komodo versus DigiCert, basically the same thing, right? It's SHA-256. Josh, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, SHA-256 is an encryption algorithm, you know, and so they're both SHA-256 encryption. That kind of throws me way back to the day of programming and development, but yeah, SHA-256. So there's the same thing, Komodo, DigiCert, same certificate.
Yeah. And for anybody who might be wondering what is an SSL certificate, maybe we should clarify that. In the simplest sense, if you look at your browser, you'll see next to the URL or the website address, you'll see a padlock, which they've grayed it out now. As long as there's a padlock there, you know that your site's secure. If it's not secure, then you're running the HTTP protocol instead of HTTPS, and it's not encrypted, and you will get a warning. I can't remember if it's red. Is it an open red padlock? Or do you get the big warning and proceed with caution? This site is unsafe. Something like that.
So two different things. So if it's unsecure, right, it'll have the little, you'll see that noted by the icon that's in the URL bar, right? But if if they're trying to run the site via the HTTPS protocol, but their certificate is expired or they don't have one installed right, then you're going to get that page error, right? That pops up that says, that this page is not secure. And then you can go to advanced settings, and then you can proceed, right, with caution or whatnot. So that's the difference in the two, right? So if they're not running on HTTPS, if they're just running on HTTP traffic, and it's not secure, and so they're not using SSL certificate, the only way you'll know is just by the padlock up there in the top left.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's not a good look. If you're running a business and your site isn't secure and you're getting those warnings, then that's not great. And it's amazing how many companies are still running their websites on insecure HTTP, and the warnings are all there, and that to me does not instill confidence.
Sure.
So it's an important step to take to secure your site.
Well, and I'll say one more thing, because we've been on this kind of first steps, right, for building.
We have. It's so fascinating.
Well, I'll throw one more thing out there in terms of like confidence and user experience. When you're thinking about your first step in the SEO journey, right, of building a strategy, one thing that you really don't learn until you start getting into advanced SEO, but I think is really good to understand, is that the way your users, the traffic that comes to your site, the time they spend on your site, the interaction they have on your site, right, plays a factor into the algorithm and how Google ranks your site, right? Mm-hmm. It's no longer Google just sending their bot through your site, reading your content, figuring out where everything is, and then ranking it based on that. The algorithm is so complex. The artificial intelligence, you could term it, the way that their machine learning takes all this data and processes it, they're more and more, they're processing how users interact with their site, because this is what Google's trying to understand. They're taking the user journey and trying to see if your website was a good fit for that user that typed in a search term, clicked on your website, and then what happened? Did they just leave your site immediately and go to another search result? Because if they did, that tells Google that, well, maybe your site and the way you're presenting things is not basically giving the content or the information that user with that search term was looking for. And that can affect your rankings, right? So so think about when you're implementing your website, implementing it from a mobile perspective. You want to make sure it's mobile responsive, because that plays a factor, right? Making sure that you're engaging your audience on your website and on your page. Is your content engaging? Is it easy to read? Does it hold the attention, and does it answer the questions that your users are asking in their mind? It's really important.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm going to ask you another question now.
Sure.
Which isn't moving you along, your three
okay.
pillars, but it's a burning question I just have to ask. So when it comes to keywords, you can set up your keywords on different pages, but if you use something like Yoast, you can only set up one keyword. So do you recommend using the premium version or some other software so that you can have those multiple keywords to rank for? Or is one per blog or per page enough?
Well, so here's the thing. When we're working with a strategy, we're trying to rank a very specific search term, right, per page, right? Now, that doesn't mean that page will only rank for that particular search term. There are all these other variations of that search term and long tail keywords and things that single page may rank for. Mm-hmm. So, like, for instance, what's a good example? Well, we'll use the laser engraver example. If I'm talking about the best in laser engraver of 2019, right, then I'm going to build a page where its content is built around that particular search term, best laser engraver 2019, right? And I may be able to capture the traffic for, say, 10, 20, 30 keywords that are kind of similar to that, but I'm really focused on that one search term. And in terms of Yoast, I really I've never bought the premium version, because I don't really use their tools built into Yoast to determine whether or not I've optimized my content well. I mean, it may be a good starting point for some people, but I use a lot of other tools that help me understand, is my content and is my meta descriptions and titles and headers, are they all optimized for the best possible on-page SEO content? So I really don't think that it's necessary. I think you can stick with the free version, stick with the one search term, that kind of helps you if you're a beginner to SEO.
Yeah. And then you can always, as you say, you may have a keyword, but then there's alternative synonyms that you can incorporate into your descriptions as well in order to tick the boxes. And I can see that, you have a light. That's good, because I could see it gradually getting dark around you. I have one more question, and then we'll start to move through the other pillars.
Sure.
When we're talking about Google and the algorithm, what happens with all these pop-ups that people are putting in their Shopify stores?
Maybe you can clarify that question just a little bit in terms of the pop-ups. Yeah.
So exit pop-ups, you'll get a timed pop-up that comes up after being on the page a certain amount of time. You'll get free coupon pop-ups. You'll get sales notification pop-ups telling you how many times someone's just bought something. It's a very dynamic experience, let's say. And my question is, how does that impact SEO?
Yeah.
Or does it not?
Okay, so I think it's a great question. That's actually an awesome question. I love this question, because those things, right, by themselves, right, are not impacting, say, rankings and whatnot, because from Google's perspective, right, they're invisible, right? They probably don't even exist when the bot crawls the page and whatnot. But like we just talked about, in terms of the data that Google's collecting on how users interact with your site, right, that plays a factor, because it's in your website is then engaging the user for a longer period of time, right? Maybe it drives them to take action and actually go to yet an additional page on your site instead of leaving, And so those things, I think, are very useful in engaging the user, because the more you can engage the user with dynamic things on your site, and it doesn't necessarily have to be flashing lights and things running across the screen. I think back to like the original websites with all the flash, right? It's more of actually useful and dynamic things that, captures people's attention and gives them maybe what they're looking for at just the right moment. So I think it's great for user engagement.
Well, that's really good to hear. I wasn't expecting that answer, I have to say. I was considering doing Google Shopping, and which is a paid strategy, and I was advised to remove all my pop-ups because Google Shopping doesn't like them. And I know that's probably a side issue and may not be relevant to SEO specifically, but that was just why I asked the question.
Okay.
So that's really good to know. I have a couple more questions, and we really do need to move on. So Jeff's asking, SSL is usually only needed for a shopping cart, correct? My answer will be no. Whatever site you have, you need SSL, because if your site is showing as insecure, then that really damages your brand, damages your that whole notion of whether you're trustworthy or not. But yes, no one, I would imagine, in their right mind would start sending financial transactions via a site that isn't encrypted. So definitely very important for e-commerce and for any sort of transactional website. But no one's going to fill out a contact form with their details, I imagine, if the site's not secure either. And virtually all websites will have a contact form on them. So SSL across the board would be my answer there. And then Jeff asked, is it true that Google will block or limit your ranking of your site if you don't have an SSL certificate installed? Absolutely, that would be my answer. Joshua, anything to add?
I mean, it goes into the ranking factors, just like the whole mobile responsive thing went into the ranking factors. I mean, Google's looking at an enormous amount of ranking factors. I mean, some people say it's between 500 and 700 different things that they're looking at in terms of off-page, on-page. There's so many things that go into it. Putting your best foot forward on all of these things is going to give you a competitive edge over your competitors. you're always going to have competitors, right? There's always competitors, right? And so getting a competitive edge over them is important. So taking this step, you know, to put yourself in that position, I think is good in all of these things, whether it's SSL certificates, whether it's hosting for site speed and things like that. It's all really important.
Awesome, thank you. So shall we move on to I think we're on the third pillar, aren't we now?
Well, I don't think we really, we kind of
more about the second pillar.
Yeah, we kind of blended the first and second. So the first one was all about making sure your website's a good candidate for SEO. I think we've covered that really well. You know, have good hosting, use a good platform like WordPress. You know, set yourself up for success. You know, install these good plugins, which I think Sharon goes over really well. You know, in her course and everything that she's doing or program, and you know, set yourself up for success. The second step is to optimize your content and everything that's on your site, everything from your title tags to your meta descriptions to the content that people are reading, right? Optimizing that for the keywords you're trying to rank. And we covered that a little bit. We talked about, you know, one keyword search term that you're trying to focus on per page and things like that. So that was a little bit of second step, but there's a lot of tools you can implement, you know, and you know what, Sharon, we might actually, I think probably put out a list of some recommendations. There's some free ones out there that people can use. There's some paid ones if they want to take the advanced step, you know, and really use some good tools out there. I've got a bunch of recommendations I could probably make.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's really the key. You know, you want to make sure you have first engaging content, right? Make sure you have really engaging content, but then you can take that content and you can optimize it for Google's algorithm. Because here's the thing, right? You have hundreds and thousands of results for a search term, right? And your goal is to be at the top. You want to be number one, number two, number three. You want to be right there, right? So what you have to do is evaluate, why is Google ranking my competitors in this specific page for this particular keyword? And if you can analyze those competitor websites that are ranked number one, number two, number three, and so on, then you can determine, okay, these are the factors out of 700 factors that Google is more than likely weighting as in a scale, right? Weighting those factors the highest, and I need to take advantage of those factors in how I'm adjusting my content, how many times I'm using my keywords, where I'm placing my keywords within my content, and things like that. And there's some tools that I'll link to later that can help with that. But that's really what this second pillar is all about: getting your content optimized and comparing it with your competitors and getting that competitive edge.
Yeah, sounds awesome. I'm going to grab those tools first.
For sure.
Okay, so that's great. So we've done the first one, we've revisited and finished off the second pillar. Yes. So what is the third step business owners and entrepreneurs need to take?
Yes. So the third step you really need to take is you need to understand that your website is looked at by Google as an entity. And I don't want to go into too much like of the advanced detail of how Google uses entities and figuring out how to rank those, but especially for local search results. Like if I'm searching for a plumber or a roofer, you know, or say a doctor or a dentist, you know, those are local results. And Google looks at every single website as an entity. So you can think about it, you know, as just like we might think of a friend that we have as a person, as an entity. Google looks at every website, right? And it looks at all the things it knows about that particular website, right? And the things that Google knows about each website are other websites that mention it, right? These are like directory sites, news publications, directory sites that we typically in the SEO world call citations, right? These are all really important in building the entity that Google can understand, because you want to help Google understand what your website is, like what's it connected to in the real world, right? Because Google doesn't look at a website as just some, you know, digital marker digital pixel, right? It wants to connect that with the real world and understand your website as much as possible. So connecting your website to author profiles, so if you're publishing blogs and articles, and you're, an author of this content you're writing, and you have an author profile somewhere on another site, establishing that connection between the two. And it builds credibility for your website and how Google sees it as an entity.
Yeah, cool. Really good to know. And I think a part of that is on my very, very long to-do list, but it's and we've spoken about this too, Joshua, exchanging links for relevant pages so that I could feature on my page and Joshua's digital agency, maybe some other websites that you may have that are relevant, and in turn Joshua will feature mine, and that builds credibility too, because it's giving Google an idea of the entity presumably and how it links to other entities out there, and boosts your SEO. It's just kind of, I know it's on a tangent a little, but it just made me think of that now with what you were talking about with the third pillar.
Sure. And the key here's the thing, we've talked a lot about like structuring your website, structuring your content, and this whole building your entity goes right into what you were just mentioning, Sharon, just about how part of the algorithm is how other websites and their content link to your website. Right. In the world of SEO, we call those backlinks, right? That's a common, buzz term that we use, but it is truly about building links from relevant content and authoritative content to help Google understand that your website is an authority on the particular subject that it surrounds, right? Because if Google understands that your website has relevant content to a particular topic, and it understands that it's an authority on that topic, it will greatly help you in your rankings, because that's ultimately what Google's looking for, and those are the kind of results it wants to give to its users. So one of the great ways to do that is, like you said, guest blogging is probably one of the most natural and organic ways to build links. That's where you approach a blog that, say, is relevant to the type of website that you have. It could be a blog. It could be, there's a lot of other websites that feature articles and things. And you reach out to them and you say, hey, we've got this great article we wrote that's relevant to the type of website that you publish content for. It has a link to our website. We're also in this space. These websites are looking for content and they want people to be guest posts and guest authors. So it's a great way to write content and get links from great websites to your website and build the authority and relevance for your website in Google's eyes.
Yeah. And what about for me, even though writing is something I love, I find that it's not the most natural content for me to produce because of my time limits and constraints.
Sure.
So if I were to have a page link, a page exchange link on my website, does that do the same thing for Google or not? Or is Google too smart and sees that that's just a link and not a blog article?
So it is looked at differently by Google, because here's the thing. Imagine that you got a guest post that you wrote, say it was 1,000 or 2,000 word article that was published in say a major news publication, major news website. We'll say for the United States, we'll give it a reference of like the Wall Street Journal or Forbes, right? And you have this article published and it's about something that's relevant to your website. It's the same type of content, right? Same content topic. And there is a link from a particular search term or keyword in that article, right? That's a link to your website, right? That is powerful because number one, it's coming from an authoritative source, right? Number two, it's that search term and key phrase that's the actual anchor tag, right? That's linking to your website. And it's also built around relevant content to your website. So those are the kind of links you're going after. Yes, there are some benefits to the link exchange thing, but it comes from an older era of SEO. And nowadays, it's all about building authoritative and relevant links from websites.
Okay, that's it. That's good to know,
Yeah.
and interesting. Yeah, awesome. So we are now on to the fourth pillar, if you would like to talk about.
Yes. Fourth and final pillar is understanding that Google search is not always the same. There are updates that are continually going on, right? There was something put out on Twitter either yesterday or the day before about a new core update that Google is releasing. And they're calling it the June core update, right? Google is constantly, and I say that just as a reference that it's kind of a big day, for SEOs, because we perk our ears up and we're like, okay, what's going to happen, because as they roll out algorithm changes, right, it can impact how sites are ranked. And this changes over time. So the fourth pillar to SEO is to maintain the strategy of being a constant learner, right? And you have to maintain your keyword rankings and determine, have my keyword rankings changed? And if they have, maybe you've improved, but maybe you've declined, right? And you have to ask yourself why. And you have to then become, a detective and understand and try and investigate, why have my rankings declined? Was it a change in the algorithm? Was it a change in the way that my content is structured? You might have to go back and revisit and look at your competitors. So the fourth pillar is always about staying on top of the latest and greatest changes, what's happening in the search engine community, and also revisiting your strategy, adjusting your strategy, and testing things. It's really important because search engine optimization is all about math and data. It all comes down, it's like the very core of it is math and data and collecting all this information, right? And it's an algorithm. It's a massive math problem. And so if you can reverse engineer that for your site and understand, how these changes affect it, then you can become a very effective SEO strategist, whether it's for clients or whether it's for your own website. So the key is to stay on top of those things.
And how do you tell when there are changes in the algorithm, other than that you see that there's been an increase or a decrease in your SEO ranking? Is there a way of figuring it out?
So actually, Google publishes whenever they release major algorithm, updates. So you can follow those sources on Twitter and whatnot. Here's the thing, that Google releases a lot of information about what SEOs and people that do search engine optimization should do to optimize their site, right? And you have to take everything with a grain of salt. And here's the reason why. Is because Google is ultimately in the business of making money. Search engine optimization is about getting your website in front of search traffic that Google actually is not making any money off of, right? Their money maker is ads, right? The ads they're displaying. And so take everything that Google says with a grain of salt. That's what I would caution people. Do your research, join groups. There's some great SEO groups out there, that share a lot of opinions and things, and make it make it kind of one of those, if you find yourself just slightly fascinated by it, make it one of those lifelong learning things that you're always just like reading up a little bit about and just learning, because it's a truly fascinating subject.
Oh, it is. It really is. And I guess that's where, to some extent, I prefer Google to Facebook, because their algorithms are also secret.
Yeah.
And so at least I wasn't aware that they publish the changes that they make. But I see them more favorably than Facebook then, in terms of the algorithms and the way they rule our lives. That's for sure.
Sure.
They rule our lives and our behavior and business, and it's but that's another topic for another time. So we covered the 4 pillars, and thank you very much for that. That's really, really interesting stuff. So we've talked about the fact that the perfect mindset of a business owner is really to be a constant lifelong learner and be open to these changes. Is that enough to guarantee their success, though?
Okay, I think even if we just left everyone with this, I think this is kind of a good summary of it. I think that there are 2 diverging paths with how you understand SEO, right? maybe you're more of the hobbyist in terms of the website that you have, the blog that you have, and it's about, experimenting with content and building an audience and engaging your audience. And maybe it's not your, livelihood and your main income stream. And I would say there's more room to experiment with SEO, right?
Yeah.
For some businesses, that may even be the case, that people, maybe it's a passive income stream they have and they want to experiment with SEO, right? And I say, go for it, experiment. If it's something you're passionate about, learn it and do it well. And then I think there's a third subset, though, of business owners that are focused on running a business and delivering an exceptional product, an exceptional service, whether it's a e-commerce or if it's a local business or something like that. And really, with as many clients as I've worked with, a really good business owner is not going to have the time to dedicate to SEO to effectively establish a long-term strategy that's going to really make sure that they're capturing as much search traffic as possible that ultimately impacts their bottom line revenue, right? And so whenever I sit down and have this conversation with business owners, they really start to see that when I talk to them, and they're like, you're right, we should focus on running my business and optimizing our business and what we're delivering as a product or service, while we hire people to handle, our website building and our SEO and running our ads and things like that. And I think that's the thing, I would caution business owners that are very involved with running their business, because there's only so many hours in the day. And search engine optimization is, it does take time. Like, you will find once you get into it, from the learning aspect, the trial and error, as a beginner and everything, you're going to spend hours and hours and hours that you could probably dedicate to your business and expanding your business and delivering a better product and service. And I think in those situations, it's probably better to hire someone, to handle your SEO. So it depends on your situation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I did the One Funnel Away challenge, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from that's with Russell Brunson and Stephen Larson. And one of the biggest takeaways was that if you try to be an expert in every aspect of your business, then you're doomed to failure. You'll never launch, because you can't do it all. You need to, some of it has to be delegated. You can't do it all. And one question I have in that respect is, because a lot of what you do with SEO does come down to generating appropriate and strategic content, who do you use to create the content, or is that something that your agency does?
Yeah, so our agency has internal writers that their whole thing is all about building and developing content. They have a creative side to them, I would say, more than a technical and SEO side of things. And we've trained them in that SEO respect of, writing content from a creative perspective and an informative perspective, but with just an edge of SEO, right? And then we take that and strategically implement it. And even if, say you struggle, if you're listening to this and you struggle with writing content, there are a lot of resources out there that can take maybe your bullet point outline and write some great content. And it's not too terribly expensive. And so I would, we may be able to, there's a few services I can think of. We might drop some links. I'll talk to Sharon about that, or if there's anybody that knows any great content writers. I have a few in mind that, have some really inexpensive rates and write great quality content. And when I get content back, for some of these people and some of the individuals that I work with, I'm always like, wow, that's amazing. And it's kind of fresh and refreshing to read content that you don't write yourself. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else? We've covered an awful lot. It's been absolutely fascinating. But is there anything else that you'd like to cover before we close for this live?
I think that last summary on just kind of whether you're a hobbyist or a business owner is probably a good summary to the 4 pillars. And this Facebook Live or wherever this is being streamed live to, is if you're watching it, you probably have had a lot of questions pop up, so feel free to add comments, to this video, and we'll try to answer them as much as possible. But yeah, I think that SEO is can be complicated in the beginning, but I think if you just take the the first initial steps, and just think about these 4 pillars, right? Creating a good candidate for SEO, right? Focusing on your website, right? Then really optimizing your content and everything on your site. And then just really working on building your links, right? And building your authority and relevancy to your website, and becoming authoritative on the content and the topic that your website is about, right? And then staying on top of things. I think that's the key thing that I would say are the takeaways from all of this, and hopefully that that people take away. So
no, that's a perfect summary, and really, really helpful. And we appreciate your time, and we also appreciate the fact that you're so active in the group and that you provide support and give back, as one of our commentators said before, and I did just publish it on the screen. So
sure.
Who was that? That was Frank Camley. So what was it he said? Joshua, technical expert. I'll put it up again. And giving back to the community. What more can we want? Which pretty much sums it up. So that is awesome, and we really appreciate your time today, Joshua.
Sure.
And yeah, we'll keep the conversation going in the next wee while after the live is finished. So I think we will start to draw to a close now. I just wanted to mention what you can see on the banner below. I have just launched my WordPress 30-day challenge, which is an awesome course, step-by-step video tutorials in an over-the-shoulder style that takes you from a starter WordPress website that you get for free with the course, and we take you through how to customize that site and make it super professional looking and ready to launch in 30 days or less. So you see the link below. It's challenge.kem bizinabox bizinabox.com/free-website. So check it out, and yes, I will look forward to seeing some of you on the inside of the course. Thank you all so much for tuning into this live in the KEM WordPress Community Facebook group. See you again next week. Bye-bye.